The drive home was a blur. The road stretched out before me, an endless ribbon of asphalt under the dark, overcast sky. I wasn't really seeing the streetlights or the houses as they flashed by. All I could think about was the look on my father's face, the coldness in his eyes, the disappointment that had bled into every word he'd spoken, the betrayal. It echoed through my mind like an endless loop. I could still feel the envelope in my hands, its sharp edges biting into my skin, burning into my memory. The documents inside proof of something that wasn't even mine. It was hard to breathe when I thought about it. My throat felt tight, like something was lodged there, choking the air out of me. I had been accused of something so monstrous, something I never thought possible. And I had no idea how to fix it, how to make them believe the truth. My family, my own flesh and blood, had turned on me, and worse, they believed it. They believed I had betrayed them. They believed the lie. My fingers gripped the steering wheel tighter. It didn't make sense. I had been nothing but loyal to them. I had been the daughter who always called, who always helped, who made every family event. I had spent hours listening to my father's stories, helping my mother in the kitchen, doing everything I could to show them how much I loved them. And yet, here I was, with an envelope of lies that had somehow become the truth in their eyes. I remembered the times when we'd sit around the dinner table laughing, talking about everything under the sun. The warmth of those memories of my father's reassuring voice, of my mother's soft laughter, was now drowned in the coldness of their betrayal. I remembered my father's hands, steady and sure, as he guided me through difficult times. He had always been my protector. My mother, with her gentle smile and comforting words, had been the one to dry my tears when the world felt too heavy. They were my anchors, the people I trusted more than anyone else in the world. And now they were the ones who had thrown me overboard. My thoughts were interrupted by a sharp, bitter laugh that escaped my lips, but it felt foreign, out of place. How had I not seen it? How had I been so blind to the manipulations, the lies? And then, like a sudden gust of wind that knocks you off your feet, the truth hit me. This wasn't just a random betrayal. This was calculated. This was planned. I thought back to my cousin, the one who had always been so charming, so helpful, always there when I needed someone to talk to. I had trusted them completely. Every time I needed advice, they were there. Every time I felt uncertain, they were the one who had reassured me. They had been the person I turned to when I was lost, when I needed someone to lean on. And now I saw it. The smile, the easy laughter, the way they had always made me feel like we were in this together, it had all been a mask. A carefully constructed illusion to keep me from seeing the truth. They had been setting me up from the very beginning. I gritted my teeth, anger bubbling up inside me like a volcanic eruption. The fury was blinding, but beneath that was something darker, something colder. A sense of betrayal so deep, it made me question everything I thought I knew about myself. How could I have been so trusting? How could I have been so blind to the truth? My hands trembled as I gripped the steering wheel, but I kept driving. I couldn't go back. I couldn't go back to that house, that family who now saw me as a thief, as someone who had betrayed them. The walls I had spent years building up around me, walls of love, trust, and loyalty, had come crashing down in a single moment. I pulled into my driveway, the headlights of my car illuminating the empty street. Everything seemed still, eerily quiet. I sat in the car for a long time, my hands resting on the wheel, my mind racing. What do I do now? The questions consumed me, swirling around in my head. How could I fix this? How could I make them see the truth? I closed my eyes, and for a moment, I allowed myself to feel the weight of the betrayal. The sadness, the crushing sorrow that had settled into my bones. I had given everything to my family, everything, and this is how they repaid me. By accusing me of something I didn't do. The tears welled up in my eyes, but I forced them back. I couldn't afford to cry, not now. Not when I was so close to the answer. I took a deep breath and pushed open the car door. As I stepped out, The cold night air hit me like a slap in the face. I walked toward the door of my house, but something stopped me. Something deep inside me told me I couldn't just go inside and pretend everything was fine. I had to take control of this. I had to make them see the truth. But how? I turned the doorknob slowly, stepping into the darkness of the house. The lights were off, the place eerily quiet. It felt like a ghost house. A house that used to be full of love and warmth. Now it felt like a prison. I couldn't shake the feeling that everything was slipping away, and I had no control over it. I walked to the kitchen, my mind still racing. As I reached the counter, I noticed a few items that had once brought me comfort. The mug my mother always used, the small photograph of our family trip to the beach, it was all still there, frozen in time. But it wasn't the same anymore. Those things didn't feel like mine. They didn't feel like they belonged to the life I had lived. I thought about what my father had said. We have evidence. It was as though he had sentenced me before I even had a chance to explain. Evidence. But of what? The numbers on those bank statements, the name of a company I didn't recognize, it didn't make sense, but it was real. It felt real. And then it hit me. The envelope, the one they had handed me. I hadn't opened it completely. There was still something about it that nagged at me, something I had missed. The more I thought about it, the more the truth seemed to slip further away from my grasp. There had to be something I was missing. Some detail that would expose the lie, that would reveal the truth. I grabbed the envelope and tore it open again, spreading the papers across the counter. My hands were still shaking as I scanned the documents once more, and then I saw it. Something I hadn't noticed before. Something buried deep within the transactions. There, at the bottom of the last page, was a name I recognized all too well. It was my cousin, but not just any cousin. It was the one who had been with me through it all, the one who had been so kind, so supportive, the one I had trusted completely. And now I realized something even darker. They had orchestrated this. They had set me up. They had forged the evidence, manipulated everything, and turned my own family against me. I felt a chill run down my spine. This wasn't just about money. This wasn't just about a few misplaced documents. This was about power. This was about control, and they had taken everything from me. I took a deep breath, my hands trembling with a mixture of rage and disbelief. The truth was finally clear, and now I had a choice to make. I could let this go. I could walk away, try to rebuild my life, and pretend that nothing had happened. But deep down, I knew I couldn't, not after everything I had lost. No, I wasn't going to let this lie stand. I wasn't going to let them get away with what they had done. But how? How could I make them pay for the hurt they had caused me? The answer came slowly, but it was undeniable. I would make them see the truth. I would make them regret ever doubting me. And in doing so, I would take control of my own life once more. With that thought, something inside me shifted. The hopelessness that had once consumed me began to dissipate, replaced by a cold determination. I was going to make them pay. I was going to get my revenge, but for now I needed to think. I needed to plan. And so, as the night stretched on, I sat in the silence of my house, my mind racing with thoughts of retribution. I would make them regret underestimating me. I would make them wish they had never turned against me. And they wouldn't see it coming. But for now, I carried the weight of my plan in silence. The first step was already in motion. The next part would be the hardest. And when it was done, they would know that I was no longer the person they had tried to crush. I was stronger than that. And I was ready. The air was thick with tension as I stepped into the living room, the smell of turkey and pumpkin pie wafting through the house. Thanksgiving. A time to give thanks. But nothing about that evening felt right. It was as if the room had been weighed down by a heavy silence that didn't belong, a strange undercurrent that made every glance seem suspicious. There were my parents, sitting at the head of the table, their faces taut with a discomfort I couldn't place. My father, his brow furrowed, his lips tight, seemed to be avoiding my gaze. And my mother, her face was a mask of controlled emotion, her eyes flickering with something that looked a lot like disappointment. I tried to shake off the feeling gnawing at my gut. It was supposed to be a holiday, a day to forget about everything else. But as I scanned the room, my relatives' polite smiles seemed forced, too rehearsed. Something was wrong. They were the ones who had always told me that no matter what happened, family was everything. Blood is thicker than water, my father would always say. We stand by each other, no matter the circumstances. I had believed those words, had lived by them, had never doubted for a second that my family would always have my back. But now, as I sat there, trying to savor the delicious meal before me, I couldn't shake the feeling that those words had been nothing more than a lie. The room buzzed with the sound of quiet conversation, the clinking of silverware, and the occasional burst of laughter. But it all felt distant, as if I were hearing it from a faraway place, trapped inside a bubble of unease. I forced myself to focus on the food, the warmth, the familiar sights and sounds, but it was like I was watching a scene unfold through a foggy window. And then it happened. I felt my heart stop for a moment. There was something in his expression, something that made my skin crawl. I hadn't seen that look in his eyes before. I need to address something, he said, his voice steady, but his tone held an edge of something colder, something unfamiliar. Everyone here has been patient enough, but it's time we stop pretending. My stomach twisted. I looked at my mother, who shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her hands wringing the napkin in her lap. She avoided my gaze, and for the first time in my life, I saw fear in her eyes. Dad? I managed to croak out, my voice betraying the unease I was trying so desperately to hide. But he didn't answer. Instead, he turned to my mother, who now stood up beside him, her face pale. We've been forced to confront the truth, my father continued, his voice growing colder with each word. And it's time you all knew. Our daughter, he said, his eyes narrowing as he looked directly at me, has been stealing from us, lying to us. She's been living a double life, deceiving us at every turn. I felt my world shatter in that instant. My breath caught in my throat. I couldn't process the words. I couldn't understand them. Stealing from them? From my own family? The room was spinning, and I fought to stay upright. My eyes darted around the table, searching for some sign of understanding, some hint that this was all just a cruel joke. But my relatives, my cousins, aunts, uncles, all of them stared at me with wide, shocked eyes. How could they accuse me of something so monstrous? I wanted to scream, to tell them they were wrong, that they had to be mistaken. But the words stuck in my throat, and instead, I remained frozen, trapped in the terror of my father's gaze. You, I finally whispered, my voice barely audible. You don't mean that. I've never stolen from you. I've never done anything to hurt you. But my father's face remained impassive, and my mother didn't even look up at me. We have evidence, my father said, his voice hardening. We found it. Proof of your betrayal. My heart pounded in my chest as my father reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a thick manila envelope. You know what's inside, he said, his voice bitter. My hands trembled as I took the envelope. It was heavier than I expected. I could feel the cold, hard weight of it in my palms, and the air around me seemed to thicken, as if the entire house had drawn in a collective breath, waiting for something, waiting for me to open it. I stared at the envelope for a long moment, my thoughts racing. This couldn't be happening. This had to be some mistake. I was being framed. There was no other explanation. But what if it wasn't? What if the proof was real? The silence in the room felt suffocating. Every eye was on me, waiting for me to open it, to reveal the truth. But how could I? How could I possibly show them something that would tear my world apart? I took a deep breath and tore open the envelope. Inside were a series of papers. Bank statements, receipts, all linked to accounts that I didn't recognize. They weren't mine. But somehow, they had my name on them. My stomach churned as I flipped through the documents, each page more damning than the last. The numbers, the dates, they all made sense in some twisted, horrifying way. But I still couldn't understand how this was possible. Then I saw it. A transaction. A large sum of money, transferred to an account that didn't belong to me. I felt my blood run cold. This wasn't just a mistake. This was real. But there was something off about it. Something that didn't sit right in my gut. I scanned the documents again, and that's when I saw it, the name. The name of a company I didn't recognize, a company that seemed suspiciously familiar. My mind raced as I realized where I had seen that name before. It was my cousin's business. My cousin, who had always seemed so supportive, so close to me, the one I had confided in, the one I thought I could trust. And then the pieces started falling into place. The whispers. The secretive meetings. The way my cousin had always been so friendly, so eager to help me. But what if it hadn't been help at all? What if all this time they had been setting me up? The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. I felt sick, betrayed by someone I had loved and trusted like a sibling. Someone who had been manipulating me, using me all along. My mind raced with 1,000 thoughts, none of them making sense. Why would they do this? What did they stand to gain? And most of all, why had my family believed the lie? As I stood there, holding the envelope in trembling hands, a wave of emotion hit me. Anger, pain, betrayal, but above all, a deep, suffocating sense of hopelessness. How had things gotten so bad? The anger surged within me, hot and sharp, but beneath that rage, there was something else. Something darker. A burning desire for revenge, a thirst for justice that had been awakened in me by this cruel betrayal. But I couldn't act on it yet. I needed to think. I needed to plan. I looked up at my family, my father's disappointed eyes staring back at me. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. They had betrayed me, but I wasn't going to let them get away with it. I would make them see the truth. I would make them regret ever doubting me, and in that moment, something inside me hardened. I was going to take control of this. I was going to turn the tables, but I had to be smart. I had to bide my time, gather my strength, and when the moment came, I would make sure the people who had wronged me would pay. But for now, I had to leave. I had to walk away. But as I stepped out of that room, my heart heavy with a mixture of grief and determination, I knew one thing for sure. Nothing would ever be the same again. It was late. I sat in the dimly lit room, the only sound being the slow ticking of the clock on the wall, the weight of the night pressing down on me. The silence was deafening, but in my mind, chaos reigned. The truth was a brutal thing. It was hard to accept, even harder to let go of. I had spent hours poring over the documents, the bank statements, the transaction logs that had first torn my world apart. The name, the company, my cousin. I had trusted them with everything. They had been there for me when I felt lost, when I needed someone to turn to. They had been my friend, my confidant. How could they have done this? The betrayal, now undeniable, burned in my chest like a fire that wouldn't go out. The truth kept slipping away out of reach. I remembered the moments of trust we had shared. The quiet nights where we laughed about nothing, the long conversations that lasted for hours, where I poured out my soul and they did the same. I had believed in those moments, believed in the friendship that had seemed so pure, so untouchable. But now those memories felt like lies. The truth I had been blind to was staring me in the face, and it hurt more than I could have imagined. I closed my eyes and tried to steady my breath, but it was useless. The fury was bubbling inside me again, threatening to consume me. I had been betrayed. I had been set up. I couldn't let it stand. I couldn't let them get away with it. But how? How could I fight back against the people who knew me better than anyone else? My phone buzzed on the table in front of me, snapping me out of my spiral. I glanced at the screen. It was a message from an unknown number, a number I didn't recognize. For a moment I hesitated. Who could it be? Another part of their plan? Another lie? But the message was short and simple, yet the words felt like a slap in the face. I know what they did. You don't have to go through this alone. I stared at the message, my mind racing. How did they know? Who was this? The words had a tone of familiarity, as if the sender knew exactly what I was going through. The feeling in my gut, that nagging sense that there was something more, something bigger at play, had returned. I typed a quick reply asking who they were, but the answer that came back hit me like a ton of bricks. It's me. Your cousin's business partner. My heart stopped. The person who had always been in the background, always present but never really a part of the family gatherings. The one I had barely spoken to, but always assumed was just another distant figure in the world I'd been living in. They knew. They knew everything. I felt a cold sweat break out on my skin. This was bigger than I had realized. The betrayal wasn't just about me and my cousin. It wasn't just about a few documents. This was a web of lies, spun so intricately that I hadn't even known I was caught in it until it was too late. The message continued. I can't say too much over text, but if you want to fix this, if you want to expose what they've done, meet me tomorrow. I can help you. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to shut down the phone, block the number, and pretend like none of this was happening. But the other part of me, the part that was furious and broken and desperate for the truth, wanted to hear what this person had to say. I couldn't keep living in this limbo, in this place where every corner of my life felt like it had been turned upside down. I needed answers, and I needed them now. Where? I typed, my fingers moving without thinking. I'll text you the details. The message came through almost immediately, and with it, a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in days. This was my chance. My chance to take control of this nightmare and make them see the truth. But there was still doubt gnawing at me. Could I really trust this person? Could I trust anyone at this point? I closed my eyes, letting the doubt wash over me. But then I thought back to the last few days, to the moments when I had felt like I was losing everything. To the way my cousin had always been so supportive, so eager to listen, yet now stood at the heart of my downfall. I had to do this, for myself. For the truth. The next day, I woke up with a sense of dread and anticipation. The feeling in my chest was like a pressure I couldn't escape, but I knew I had no choice. I had to go through with it. I had to confront the people who had destroyed everything I had ever believed in. The meeting was set for a small, inconspicuous coffee shop on the edge of town, far from prying eyes. I walked in with a mixture of anxiety and determination, my heart pounding in my chest as I scanned the room. There, sitting in the far corner, was the figure I recognized from the picture on my cousin's business website. It was him. The business partner. I took a deep breath and approached the table, sitting down slowly across from him. His eyes locked onto mine, and there was something in his gaze that unsettled me. It wasn't pity, it wasn't sympathy, it was something colder, something darker. You're here, he said, his voice low, almost conspiratorial. Good, we don't have much time. I nodded, trying to steady my racing heart. What do you know? I asked, my voice steady but laced with barely contained emotion. What do you know about what they've done to me? He leaned in closer, lowering his voice to a whisper. Everything. I know what your cousin has done. I know what your family has done. But more importantly, I know how deep this goes. It's not just about the money or the documents. This is about control, power. I felt a chill run down my spine as the weight of his words settled in. Control? I repeated, my voice barely a whisper. He nodded. They've been manipulating you, all of you. Your cousin is just a pawn in a much larger game. They've been pulling the strings for years, and now they're making their move. The words felt like a punch to the gut. It was more than just betrayal. It was a carefully planned attack on everything I had ever known. They had been playing me. They had been playing all of us. The realization hit me hard, but then, something else stirred within me. The anger, the sorrow, the confusion, it all began to coalesce into something else, something darker. What do you want from me? I asked, my voice shaking slightly. I want you to help me expose them, he said, leaning back in his chair. Together, we can bring them down, but it won't be easy. You have to be ready to do whatever it takes. The words hung in the air, and for a moment, I was lost in the gravity of the decision before me. Expose them. Bring them down. I had no idea what that would entail, but one thing was certain. I couldn't keep living like this. I had been betrayed, manipulated, destroyed. And I wasn't going to let them get away with it. But as I sat there, staring at the man across from me, the weight of what I was about to do settled over me. Revenge was a dangerous thing, a double-edged sword that could cut both ways. I knew that. But in that moment, as the pieces of my shattered world began to fall into place, I made a choice. I would take control of my life again. I would take back everything they had stolen from me, and I would make them pay. The plan was taking shape in my mind, slow but sure, like a storm gathering on the horizon. It wasn't just about clearing my name anymore. It wasn't just about justice. It was about something bigger. Something that would change everything. I nodded slowly. I'm in. And just like that, the journey to exact my revenge had begun.